Thank you for joining us for 3Bs on the Law podcast, hosted by Trisha Barita, Camille Canali, and Susan Dawson. Disclaimer, this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only, not meant to provide legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Also, remember, laws change or they differ by jurisdiction, so this is not a substitute for seeking legal counsel in your jurisdiction on the current law applicable to you. Well, hello. Welcome back to 3Bs on the Law. Today, we're going to be talking about what you as a business owner may run into when using a photograph that you don't own the rights to. The Copyright Act of 1976, or we'll call it the Copyright Act here for this episode, it grants a bundle of exclusive rights to copyright owners, but balances those rights with a series of limitations. And you may have heard the word fair use. Well, the fair use doctrine, which was actually became a part of the Copyright Act, is the broadest of these limitations. It's one of the most significant ways the Copyright Act allows persons other than the copyright owner and its licensees to use the copyrighted work without authorization. So it's sort of an interesting topic. Actually, if you Google fair use, you'll see many people be explaining what they think is fair use. Many non-lawyers blog about this because it's a very popular topic, because it's people's way of thinking they can use other people's copyright property in a way, and there's just a lot of discussion about how it could be used with talking about music, video clips from movies. And here we're kind of talking a little bit more specifically about the use of photographs, especially when you're using it in your business. So it's a creature of U.S. copyright law and therefore generally is not applicable for uses outside the U.S. But today it's just me and Camille today. But Camille, let's talk just briefly about what exactly is fair use and kind of, how should a business owner sort of think of it?
Sure. So one of the earliest cases, and I'm about to date myself greatly, back in the dinosaur ages of the internet, there was actually a case involving Napster, which was one of the early file sharing. People downloaded music and exchanged music and didn't pay for it. And one of the record companies, A&M Records, got very upset with Napster and sued Napster because their artists weren't getting paid. And so I think that's one of the best examples of how the fair use kind of comes into play, because what the record company was arguing is like, look, I understand that people aren't making a profit off of sharing this music, but our artists aren't getting paid for their creative works. And the same kind of applies to photographs. So when you look at fair use, you want to look at a couple factors. So one, the purpose and how the photo or the music is being used, including whether the use provides a commercial value. So if you're using the photograph to do a presentation or for your website, you are using that to entice consumers or customers to buy your product. And so that is not a fair use, and you have to pay for that copyrighted material. They also want to look at the amount and sustainability of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. That's kind of a very complicated legal jargon that simply says you want to look at what you're using as a whole, and you want to look at the effect of the use upon the potential market. And it doesn't have to be a huge use. Like I just mentioned, if you're using a photograph to promote your business that's copyrighted, you got to pay to use the photo. And I don't know about you, Trisha, but every year I have at least one client that gets a cease and desist letter to take a photograph out of a presentation or off of a website or something like that.
Yeah, people are, so Camille, like it's so common that people just think, well, I looked at Google, and very easily you can click on Google tigers, right? And then like you click over from the just normal Google search to the images, and all these images of tigers come up, and people are like, I'll just grab one of these pictures of this tiger, right? Well, be wary of that, because those photographs, again, may be protected. People may be able to find that you used it, and you may be getting a letter that you put a tiger photograph, on your website, which you may be like, well, I'm not really selling tigers, so like, why would I be using this for commercial use? But technically, just like Camille said, putting it on the website and you have a commercial business, it's very likely that you're going to get one of these letters, and you're easier to find than an individual random with like, I'm Johnny 48321 on like, Twitter or something. Maybe harder to find their address versus you with your address published all over your website. You're going to get that cease and desist letter, and you may get a claim against you and depending on what state you're in, you may be going even beyond the federal law and getting in trouble. I mean, California, they have a lot of artists over there that want to be protected, and some different, elements that you may not see in other states. But certainly with federal use, which is what we're talking about here today, that Camille was kind of expanding on, that it's real easy to walk into that commercial use. So don't think they won't find you, because we have seen them find you, even if it's a small use in a commercial context.
And so one of the things, I think it's always good for us to give you some practical advice of what do you do to avoid such a claim. And there are all kinds of websites out there where you can go out and grab images, illustrations, and pay for their use. And there's a single use fee often, or a fee to use on a website. And you can go out, you can purchase your photograph. I recommend you keep documentation that you've purchased the photograph for the appropriate use, so that if you get a letter, you can say, hey, I purchased this, I'm legally using it, here's my evidence, go away, so to speak. But if you're not, you may actually have to take the photograph down, and hopefully they're not coming after you for some type of monetary payment for the use of the photograph, depending upon the type of business that you're in.
Yeah. And just to follow up what Camille's saying on that, which is, it is really easy. I think I think obviously, if you've ever looked into this, I think Getty Images and iStock, which is now owned by all of that's owned by Getty Images, has cheaper photographs. They have different licenses for those photographs for the use of them, more expensive. They now have video, I think. And they're just one of many, many websites that you can go, but they're just one of the bigger ones that are well known. But I think what you have to kind of look at is what's the use of what you're going to be doing it. Is it going to be published on the internet, these images and things that you're using? How are you going to be using them? And is there some sort of, license for you to use in an exception way? Don't lean on, believe me, if you Google and read the blogs on fair use, you'll convince yourself you can fair use anything, because there's a lot of non-lawyers out there talking about, well, if you use only 22 seconds of this video clip from like this movie, it'll be okay. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's not going to be okay. Like, movies in particular, they're very particularly, lots of protections related to piracy for people taking movie clips and other things. So just because you saw it on Twitter doesn't mean that it's like out there for the world to be using in a way that, and you like going and uploading that up onto your website or keeping it, in some sort of other forum on Facebook or whatever that you think will that qualify it to fair use because it somehow made it into a meme. And by the way, memes are not really what I would call necessarily transformative, which is a word. Transformative is a legal term. You may see that in these blogs that's talking about, hey, if you take the copyrighted work and you make something new, then you don't know those people anything. Well, let me tell you, that's the basis of all the most beautiful lawsuits, especially a lot out of California, but a lot of lawsuits related to copyright law where someone thought they made something transformative, and guess what? You put the two next to each other and it wasn't transformative enough. And I'm sure you can think of right now a couple songs where you've heard they sound kind of similar. And like the one music artist that was really maybe well-known had to pay another well-known music artist for the use of that. So those kind of things exactly are it sounds funny as we're joking here, but it's a lot of money, very expensive. So yeah. Don't do it. Don't try to be transformative without getting some legal advice on that. I say stay away from all of it. Just pay for the pictures you want to use and be done with it, Camille. That's what I think.
Right. And I think that too, you also have to think about how technology has changed, especially and evolved, especially in the last couple of years, really. When COVID started and people were doing presentations on Zoom, which is on the internet, and you're putting stuff out there, you don't necessarily have as much control over what people are seeing. And so people who are trying to sneak images that they weren't paying for into their presentations before may not be able to get away from it because people can search and find out where their photos have been used on the internet. I don't know how to do that. I am not a technological genius. Anybody who knows me personally knows that I am not very technologically savvy, but I know it can be done. And I think it's very interesting how technology has also changed this whole industry.
Yeah, and I think even though Camille's joking here about her lack of technology stuff, but if she doesn't know how to do it, I'll tell you this: she knows how to hire an expert that can figure it out. So like, watch out for Camille with all of that, like pretending you aren't going to get in trouble. Get one of these letters from Camille, but yeah, I mean, and this really is like some lawyers make this a business to go after people. They advertise. You think someone's using your stuff? Come let me represent you and send a letter and get some monetary value for your loss of use of your photograph or whatever. So a bit of like, I don't know, bait and switch or something to that effect. I think it's very risky to start using photos, especially in a commercial use nowadays. Just it's not worth your headache. And I'm always like, if you are going to use one of these websites, most of them have a clear license on there. You download the license, like Camille said, keep that, pocket it. I purchased it this day. It says I can use it for all these uses. A lot of them are very broad. You can use them in, if you pay for the photograph, you can sometimes use it repeatedly, like into brochures and other things. Usually it'll be like sometimes limiting you depending on how much you pay for how long you can use it or the use. But, it's very easy now for you to get a photograph in a legal way that you just don't need to risk all the drama that's not necessary and not getting it the right way. That's what I say, Camille.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of websites where you can get photos and stock use images they're not very expensive. So it's just not worth the headache of having to deal with the cease and desist or, God forbid, litigation.
Yeah, and don't think like just to readdress that. I just want to say that like, just because you may not be getting a direct financial gain, it is very clear that the courts have said that does not need to happen for you to do the violation, for you to owe the damages to someone. So just think about that. You're making no money off this photograph you're using inappropriately, and now you owe someone else money. Like that just doesn't make good business sense. I think that's pretty much it. Camille, do you have anything else to add?
I've got nothing.
Well, we miss Susan, and hopefully she'll be with us on the next one. So thank you for joining us today again on 3Bs on the Law.
Thank you for joining us on today's podcast of 3Bs on the Law. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. We also welcome any comments. If you'd like to get in touch with us or suggest a future topic, you can email us at 3THREEBsonthelaw@gmail.com. And because we're lawyers, we need to remind you that this podcast is not meant to provide you with legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.